Oh, yes. This is the Hardcore Marketing Show. I'm Casey Cheshire, your host for this epic journey. And today's show, sponsored by Cheshire Impact, on a mission to help people maximize their use of Pardot and Salesforce. CheshireImpact.com. Bam. There it is. I just hit a tiny little button on a tiny little laptop, but yet this huge thing starts and these like two forces colliding on this awesome episode here. I'm excited to introduce the guest today. He is a fellow trailblazer and Salesforce Ohana. What does that mean? That means family. The Salesforce ecosystem is like a family, and to be able to hang out with a fellow marketer with over 10 years of experience developing and executing these digital marketing strategies and campaigns with the right stack and the right audience, man, we're going to have a lot to talk about. He's won a whole bunch of awards. 2019 Salesforce Limitless Award. Gonna ask about that. And he is also an official 2020 Salesforce Marketing Champion, Director of Digital Marketing at Cummins. Nick Wojdyla, welcome, sir.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. It's great to have you here. I know we had chatted a while back and we're just kind of all surviving here in our home offices and making it work. How you been?
Yeah, I've been busy. I mean, as I'm sure everyone is, right? You got
Yeah.
personal situation, whatever that may be, if you have kids or not even, and work. I think a lot of people's jobs have changed in the last couple of months of maybe what they used to do to what they have to do now. And so I think everyone's just trying to maintain and figure it out and play it day by day. And
Right.
it's near impossible to predict the future and how long this is going to last, or what the next 5-10 years even will look like now that this has happened. So
True.
I think
Sure
everyone's
enough.
just trying to figure it out, man.
You know what? I've got a time machine, but it only goes backwards. But we get to that later on. So we'll talk about the time machine later. But it's
Beautiful.
unfortunately, it only goes one direction, unfortunately. But hey, man, this is our Marketing Champion Series show. I'm excited to pick your brain, learn from you the strategies you're using. So let me pass you this thing. It's kind of heavy for me, but it almost looks like this was made for you. Ugh. Okay, here you
Oh,
go.
wow.
Thor's hammer. You got it?
I
You got it?
got it. Let me
Okay,
grab that.
sweet.
Nice.
One-handed, like a boss. Look at that. Dude, take Thor's hammer for me, smash some kind of marketing myth, bogus strategy, misconception. Just set the record straight once and for all.
Yeah, I think one of them, and I don't know, a lot of people are probably on the fence about this and may disagree with me, but it's around kind of targeting the right audience and whether or not you should be using like personas or not. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of marketers, for whatever reason, they stick to building these personas, right? So they'll say, okay, I'm selling, fishing equipment, and so I have a persona of who I think would buy my fishing equipment. Maybe it's
Okay.
a certain demographic. Maybe they have a certain amount of household income. Maybe they're in a certain region. They have certain interests and hobbies, and say, okay, that's my perfect customer. I'm going to go and follow these people around basically online and put ads in front of them because they're the ones who would buy my product.
Yeah.
And not to say that that's the wrong approach, but you could spend a lot of money and a lot of time doing that because although that persona may quote unquote fit who would buy your product, it doesn't mean they care about your product right now. Doesn't mean that they, maybe they already have the product and they're all set and they don't need anything at the time. So you could be wasting a lot of money. And kind of the approach that I like to take is more around place and time. So instead of targeting that persona, I'm just going to, if I'm selling fishing equipment, I'm going to go ahead and put my ads on fishing websites or camping websites or whatever I feel is relevant to that.
Yeah.
So then, regardless of persona, if someone's visiting that fishing website, chances are they're interested in fishing, and chances are they're interested in fishing right now because they're on the site right
Sure.
now. So to me, that makes a lot more sense. Plus, you don't limit yourself by forgetting a persona or missing the mark when you're creating your persona because you might have a whole bunch of new customers that you've never had before that now see your ad on the fishing website or whatever it might be. They purchase your products and you look at the data on who that customer is and you say, oh wow, I would never have known that this type of person or this use case was around my product. So I typically, from a strategy standpoint, try to lean away from persona building and using that data for ad targeting. Also, not just the reason I mentioned, but also, a lot of the data out there, whether you're using a DMP or whatever you're trying to do to identify a user to see if they fit into your persona or not, a lot of that data is pretty dirty. It's not very clean at all. I know I've looked up
Oh
myself
yeah.
on some DMPs, and it says I make, anywhere between 20,000 and $500,000 a year, which is true, but
Hmm.
that's not
That's a great
specific
range.
enough. It's a big range, right? And it also thinks I'm both male and female. It thinks I did and also did not go to college. So the data is just not clean.
Wow.
So, right, if your persona is targeting someone who went to college or didn't go to college, I'm in it either way, and I may or may not be the right person.
Now,
So
do you
again,
think maybe like you fit in that category? Because I'm pretty sure I went to college and didn't quite go to college.
you know what? That might be. You might have a point there.
Did they
Yeah,
know you better than yourself at this point? Is that
yeah.
what you're
Maybe
saying?
it's like super advanced AI, then they're actually right. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. I think the persona stuff for ad targeting just doesn't really work.
Mm. No,
But
that's like total heresy, though. You know.
yeah. I think it does play a part when you're thinking maybe like on a content strategy, and you're like, all right, I gotta write about something.
Mm.
What do my customers care about? I think maybe in that scenario, persona building has a little more value. You can kind of look at your existing customers and kind of put them in some sort of bucket, if you will, or persona group, and say, all right, what does that persona care about? Do they care about technology? Do they care about the environment? Do they care about people? Or what do they
Hmm.
care about? And you can kind of have a broader content strategy that is going to kind of resonate with those personas. But I think from a targeting standpoint, it just, with today's technology and how unclean a lot of that data is with DMPs, I just don't see it working. I mean, not to say it can't work, but I think you'll spend a lot of money going that route as opposed to kind of right time, right place.
You know, it's a really interesting conversation. We haven't had this on the show, and but what I like about this, and maybe just is just the kind of conversations that this kind of format attracts, is like, who cares what the commonly held beliefs are? Like what actually works, you know? And I think there's a lot of marketers at tech companies that will put forward some kind of strategy, marketing strategy, especially if they're selling to marketers, that like this is the way to do it. But maybe that's because it helps sell their shit, you know?
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I think there's a lot of that misinformation. I know I was wrapped up in this persona thing back in the day. I mean, I went through like 15, it's, uh, 5, 8 years of marketing, learning from a popular marketing automation tool about what personas are, and come to find out, it took me being on a podcast with Adele Ravella, where she's like, "That's just a profile," you know,
Hmm.
and which is just like, oh, they like cats and they're 30 to 50 and they this, and you're like, okay, so what do I do with that? Nothing. Like cat videos, I don't know. And to your point, how is that going to help you advertise or go get more people? Doesn't really drive you anywhere. And so you're right. I think a lot of people either spend time doing that, or they don't do them at all because they're like, this doesn't seem like this would help. Why would I do that? You know? And so I hear you, man. Like how much do you want to know about your customers versus it's just the fact that they go to these sites?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, there are points where you're going to want to know very specifically who your customer is for, again, for a variety of reasons. But I think when you're a marketer and you're trying to generate interest in your product, you don't necessarily know who is going to be interested in that. I mean, you have an idea of, back to the fishing example, like you maybe have an idea of who is more likely to be interested in fishing or not, but that you're probably not going to be right 100% of the time. You're going to have a lot of missed opportunities. Um, and I think you just need to put it in the right place at the right time. And whoever
Yeah.
that audience is, that's who they are.
Right. Like they've self-selected by going to that site kind of thing. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah, they're doing it already. So you might as well, they're already in the mindset and in the mode when they're on that site. So you might as well add your message or product there. And then you can analyze the data afterwards. And if they end up buying from you, then you could start looking at all of your existing customer information and say, okay, are there any common factors between these customers or not? And maybe you use that for some other advantage down the road. But like I said, I think the targeting place is you let the customer decide and decide if they're a customer or not, as opposed to
mm,
you saying you're not my customer because you don't like cats or you don't, whatever your markers are. I think it's a little silly to kind of put yourself in a box like that.
Right. Like if you're like, oh, most of our customers are women and this and this and this, and then a guy comes along, you're like, nope, sorry.
Right. You're
Like you
not
may
even
not.
trying to reach them. And it's like, well, he's going to buy it for his wife or for,
Yeah.
somebody. And it's like, well, now you missed the mark on that. And, you lost, missed revenue potential. So,
In that case, maybe overanalyzing who you think your customer is and you don't even know. Yeah, I like the idea of the fact that, the sort of these related websites, these different kind of properties are places where the right people are going and they're only going there. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on the content of the site, but they're going there if they're in at least in the example, the fishing mindset, they're thinking
right.
about fishing. Maybe you don't know if they want a boat yet or not, but at least they're in the moment in that zone of like visualizing themselves on the lake as opposed to hitting
Right.
them randomly on the subway or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're way more likely to get engagement from them on that fishing website as opposed to them, trying to buy a TV on some website and your little fishing ad keeps popping up, or they're checking their email and they see your fishing ad popping up. Chances are they're not going to click it. They're not thinking about that in that
Yeah.
moment, and so you're going to pay for this impression, or you're just going to not get any clicks um, and whatever. So I think it's definitely right time, right place, and there's other tools out there, that we've seen where, it takes it above and beyond just even in that fishing example. So obvious ones are going to be fishing websites, maybe camping websites and things like that. But you got to start doing your research and really saying, okay, from a standpoint of like Google, for example, what other terms, what questions are people asking related to fishing? And there's going to be a
Mm,
lot of things that pop up where you're like, oh man, I would never have related this topic or this question to what I sell.
right.
And as soon as you realize those, you're ahead of the game because now you can go ahead and start targeting, even if it's just search ads, right? And when people are asking those questions or searching for
Hmm.
those topics, you're showing up because you know that your product is relevant to that question or topic, and it may not be very obvious to your competitors that you are.
Right.
And I have,
Interesting.
yeah, I've seen some really
Yeah.
good examples of that where you just, your mind's in one thing. You're like, okay, I'm trying to sell
Yeah.
this.
Do you have any examples of that or any ones that
Yeah,
come to mind?
I mean, we, even at Cummins, like for example, one of the products that they sell is like a home generator, so like
Okay.
backup power for your house, right? And so, obviously, we were, bidding on terms and websites that were related to that home improvement stuff, websites, and anything that we thought that was like, all right, if you're building a house or if you have a house,
Hmm.
you might need this. Maybe if you're in a rural area. But what we found out was the most common questions related to our product, like not directly related, but indirectly related, were questions about hurricanes and severe weather.
Mm,
So more people were searching about, um, you know, especially like in Florida, about hurricanes and how do I keep my family safe during a hurricane and how should I prepare for a hurricane? And then the data was showing us like months later, once the hurricane was over with, they were looking at home generators. So we
right.
said, oh, got it. So let's make a content strategy around the hurricane piece, and let's uh, put ourselves in a position where we're providing them value. We're not going to try to sell them anything. We're not even going to mention our generators for like the first 6 months. Let's just give them tips and tricks, how to keep their family safe during the hurricane, how to prepare
Right.
for it, and then down the road, once the dust is settled and everyone's safe, now we can start remarketing to them and saying, hey, was your power out for weeks at a time?
Hmm.
This is a product that can help with that, and it's kind of a soft sell. But we saw a lot more impact um, doing it that way than kind
Right.
of just forcing, during a hurricane, saying, hey, buy this generator, which no
Yeah.
one's going to do during a
Right.
hurricane.
What am I gonna do? I'm not gonna get it until 3 weeks later, and now you're just pissing me
Yeah,
off. But you're right.
yeah,
That was
yeah.
smart to do a slow play like that.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of examples like that. Like almost any
Yeah.
industry, any product will have something similar to that where, if you just think about your own daily searches, like if you're looking to buy, I don't know, a refrigerator or something, there's probably a bunch of other searches you do that you don't even realize that are somewhat tied to the fact that you need a fridge. Right? Like
Right.
you might have a problem, maybe there's a leak or you got something or something kind of a little off tangent from the fridge directly.
Like a
Um,
home remodel, right?
Maybe, yeah. There's a tons of things, and then and then if you notice that if it trends enough and you notice like, hey, a lot of people search for these things either before or kind of during
Mm-hmm.
their search for the fridge, now you have a whole nother kind of area to focus on content creation and really adding value and then driving awareness of your brand to kind of to help them with that problem that they have. And then
Right.
you could sell them on the product later, because once you've given them value for free and you're not trying to sell them anything, now they trust you. Now they know you're the expert in that space, whatever it is. And then when you do try to make the pitch of like, hey, we have these products or services, they're way more likely just to hear you out. Doesn't mean you'll sell to them, but they're way more likely to give you the time of day and listen
Yeah.
to your little sales pitch.
And you planted the seed early, and you
Yeah,
let it grow in there, as opposed to just trying to flash flood a brand new yard of grass. You like had to plant things and give it some water and just that. Oh man, and I even see like, hey, someone buys a new stove. Maybe they want to make sure that, well, people that have lots of money, maybe they want to make sure their fridge matches their stove. Like, ooh,
right, right.
all different kinds of people thinking different things. My question to you, and I'm glad you got into this topic, is just like, okay, place and time, sweet, easier said than done. How do you find those places? And then even this particular example, how do you find those connections? And then even the websites and those kind of things.
Yeah, I'm gonna plug a company here. I
Yeah,
normally don't do this, but
totally.
uh, there's a company based in Indianapolis, Demand Jump. If you haven't heard of them, check them out.
Demand
They're
what?
Demand Jump,
Jump.
all
Okay.
one word, Demand Jump.
Okay, sweet.
They're great. We've been using them for a while now. I know a lot of the guys who work there, and they have this platform that kind of gives you that information, right? So essentially, you go into there and they say, all right, what's your topic of interest? What products are you selling? So maybe it's bicycles. You say, all right, I'm selling bicycles. So you'll type in the term bicycle, and they'll say, all right, who are your top 5 competitors in that category of bicycles? And you plug those competitors in their websites, and it'll crawl Google and dozens of other sources and kind of spit out, hey, here are all the terms and questions that people ask that are relevant to bicycles, and here's how much market share your competitors have in those terms and questions. And so you can kind of look at it and say, all right, these are the top 100 questions about bicycles that people are asking.
Interesting.
um, my competitors are only answering 5 of those questions. So there's 95 questions that my competitors are not answering about bicycles. I'm going to go do that. And I'm just going to write blogs or whatever. And I'm going to
Right.
answer those questions. Um, and you could title the blog verbatim what the question is. So your SEO is going to be spot on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you slowly start to steal market share from them, essentially in the form of web traffic. Um, and it'll also tell you, hey, these are the websites that people are visiting before they land on your competitor. So you can kind of go back a couple steps and say, okay, they go to this blog, they go to this home improvement website, they go to
Mm-hmm.
this, I don't know, again, fishing website, and then they land on, bicycles.com or whatever, who's my top competitor. And so
Right.
now I can go to those spots and kind of put ads there to try to divert the traffic to me as opposed to letting the competitor take it. So it's a
Wow.
very powerful tool. Um, I think, it takes someone understanding and seeing the value and kind of taking that approach, which is again not the persona approach. It's really the time and the place. Um, and so I
Jeez.
think they, from a tool standpoint, they're the only tool I've seen that have done that successfully. Um,
Wow.
and I think it's really been kind of a game changer for us for sure. But I've seen several other companies use their platform as well with similar results. Right? It's kind of like a little secret recipe, little secret
Yeah,
weapon
I feel
there.
like we got a little secret nugget here. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. It's a very powerful platform, and it's unlike anything that I've seen, to be honest.
so it literally is just giving you all these questions and connections that your competitors might be tying into that you're not, or nobody's tying into.
It's more importantly the ones that no one's tying into, because you'll see questions or phrases where there's high competition, meaning all your competitors are competing for that keyword, or they're talking about that question.
Yeah.
And maybe you say, you know what, I'm not going to even get in the mix there. I'm going to spend a
Right.
lot of time and money and probably not make a dent. But you kind of see the low hanging fruit, like, okay, these are very popular questions. They're, my competitors are barely touching them or not touching them. You
Really?
just go all in on that, and it's like no one's there, man. It's like you just go and take it, and then it's all for you, right? And so,
Wow.
um, and just from the most simple, running keyword, search ads or something, like it just gives you the list of keywords to bid on. It's like, just use these 100 keywords, you'll be fine. Like, you don't really, there's not a lot of trial and error there. Again, it's a very powerful tool, and so I recommend, if you haven't heard of them, check them out. I definitely recommend them.
Heck yeah, man.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't get better than that. I'm actually kind of excited. I'm like, holy crap! It sounds like there's some stuff out there that I need to. Um, I loved because it's like what's on their minds, and
Right.
sort of interviewing all of them. It'd be great to to know what's going on over there. So wow, that's
Yeah.
cool. We'll definitely have to check them out.
Yeah.
I'm sure a bunch of people are like, huh, what is this? So it's demandjump.com. I'm just looking at it right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sweet. Any other secrets you have in there? Any other secret weapons you have hidden?
We have a
Good stuff.
couple that I won't share just yet, because they're so fresh. Like, we're still playing around to see if this is going to
Okay.
work or not, right? But
Yeah.
it's kind of, I'll give you kind of a taste of what it is. It's kind of like what I just described, but how do you do that for non-digital, kind of offline things, right?
Right.
So if you think about, like, now it's kind of a bad example, but even a year ago, people are attending trade shows. Maybe you're sponsoring events. Maybe you're running, I don't know, TV ads,
Yeah.
radio ads. How do you know if those are working? How do you know where to place it? We're trying to figure out kind of how do we replicate kind of what I just described online. How do we replicate that offline? And I think we
Hmm.
have some ideas. I think we have a solid way to do it. And again, we're kind of partnering with Demand Jump on figuring that out. And so it's bad timing on trying that, because most, in-person events and trade shows are canceled this year, and I don't
It's
know about
wacky.
next year. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's weird, but as soon as those maybe kind of pick back up, or who knows, maybe want to play around with the TV or radio space, we're gonna kind of give that a shot and see if we can't kind of replicate the same formula for that.
Sick.
Yeah.
Huh. Man. I'm really I'm sold on the idea of like it's context, right? It's like it's the context of the situation. It's not more so than anything. It's the context over the demographics or the silly profiles. It's like what's going. Do you do much with intent data? Have you done much with that? Like
Um,
the different apps out there that are kind of like trying to tie into that.
we'll do a little. I mean, not really. I think maybe some of that intent information is maybe better suited for, I don't know, like personalization down the road.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe once you've already kind of drawn in that audience, and now they're visiting your website or they're engaging with your brand, that's the time where maybe you start to dig into the data. Again, you got to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that it's clean data and that it's
Yeah.
accurate data, which is a challenge. So if it's not your first party data, it's a little risky to bet on how clean and accurate that is. But you can slowly start collecting kind of intent data using your own first party data, just as someone's
Yeah.
if you just think about someone navigating your website, looking at certain things, maybe your social properties, and engaging with your other marketing or sales efforts, you can start to gauge the intent. And there's tools out there that'll take all that information and have a layer of AI on it that kind of spit out pretty solid recommendations. And so then I think you would use those recommendations more for the personalization piece, to say,
Yeah.
okay, they're more interested in product A over product B, or they're more interested in like a service aspect as opposed to buying the product because maybe they already own it. Um, and so you can personalize the content based on maybe their intent or what you think their intent is. And that's where you can play around with A/B testing, because you might be wrong. So
Right.
you say, I think their intent's this. You show half that audience content A, half that other audience content B, see what works. A week later, switch it up. You just kind of rinse and repeat with that, infinitely. until you think you've kind of honed in on, all right, these are like the indicators or things that I feel very confident that their
Mm,
intent is this. And it's going to take you a while to get there, but yeah, he's got to kind of play around with it, I think.
okay. That makes sense. I like this transition because it now we get out of, okay, so time and place, but now we're sort of talking more about the person themselves and, talking to them in their own language. What's your take on, I mean, really, there's the challenge of like talking to ourselves is a little easier because we kind of speak the same language. When you talk to other people, like non-marketers, other departments, other industries, it's like, how do you make that transition?
Yeah, that's the challenge. That's the most challenging part of any digital marketer's job, I think. I've heard, for other, not necessarily Cummins, but other companies I worked for, and even peers of mine who work for other Fortune 500 companies, they all kind of have the same pain point, which is, you know, senior leadership or some business leader, so a non-marketer will go to the marketing team and say, "Hey, I saw Amazon do this, or I saw our competitor do that. We need to be doing that."
Mm,
And the first question is, do we need to be doing that? Like,
do we?
what are they, especially if you're going to try to compare your company to an Amazon or maybe something that's not even related to you from an industry standpoint. Like, they have a totally different business plan and marketing plan than what you do, and just trying to copy and paste whatever you think was successful for them. Which, that's the other thing, just because you saw them doing it doesn't mean it was successful at all. I've seen tons of companies have a certain social media strategy, and they put a lot of money into it, so it has a lot of visibility, and you see other companies kind of copying them because they're like, "Oh man, did you see what company A was doing?"
Mm-hmm.
And then meanwhile, on the back end, company A is like, there's no ROI, they're not getting any leads or sales, they're just blowing their money, and it's a waste for them. But everyone
Right.
else just assumes success because of the high visibility that it has. So you just have
They
to
assume
really,
success, and that company might not even be able to track it. A lot of companies we talk to, they haven't even set up ROI tracking. They don't even know. So they may
yeah,
just be blindly doing that channel.
yeah, you don't know the details. You're just looking at the cover of the book and you're assuming what's
Yeah.
inside the book, and it's like, well, you haven't read the book, so you have no idea what's really happening there. And so, I think, when you get those types of questions from someone in sales or the business, or kind of, anyone who doesn't really know marketing, you just got to back up and say, what's our objective? What are we trying to do? Trying to increase market share of something? Are we trying to launch a new product? Are we trying to just maybe maintain our market share of something because
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be a new competitor in the space? What's our high level objective? And what are the campaigns and tactics that we feel we can do that'll best give us that objective or goal, and so we can be successful? And I
Right.
think that's, when you it sounds very common sense and basic, and I think it is. I'm sure you think it is as a marketer, but the business doesn't realize that sometimes. And so when you tell them that, they're like, "Oh yeah, you're right. Okay, yeah, that thing I saw Amazon do, that wouldn't help us at all. Like, actually, now that I think about it." And so that's I think that's going to always be a challenge, because you're always going to have people who, everyone thinks they're a marketer.
Yeah.
Um,
What do they call it?
but
Like a
they're
Saturday morning, Sunday morning quarterback? What is it? Monday morning,
Monday
right?
morning. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of
Sunday
like
happened. You're like, you know what?
after the
Totally dropped
fact.
that ball. Should have. The other guy was open. Should have thrown it there. And you're like, dude, you weren't on the field. You don't even know.
Right. That's exactly it. And it's easier said than done. It's like, it's not your
Yeah.
budget. You're not the one who has to do it.
Right.
Um, and so I think that's something that's, it's always frustrating, but I think that's part of what we sign up for, is how do we kind of simplify and articulate maybe something that's very complex to them, at a high level, so um, they understand the strategy, they understand the value you bring to the table, and you also kind of at the same point are like, "Hey, back off a little. Like, you do your thing, I'll do mine. Like, you tell me if you're in charge of the business, like, you tell me what the business needs to grow, and I'll do things to get us there. Don't I
Right.
mean, I'm not coming to you telling you that we should increase market share and do all these other things or whatever.
Right.
And don't tell me how to
Refinance our line of credit. Like, I don't.
yeah, don't tell me how to run a LinkedIn campaign, right? If or whatever the case is. So I think that's something that we constantly, as marketers, are challenged with.
And it's like you want them to be tossing ideas at you, perhaps, or maybe like thoughts, but then not thinking that that's gonna immediately happen. You know, it's a challenge of like, oh,
Yeah.
sales says we should make this campaign. It like doesn't necessarily mean we should make that campaign, but they're asking for something around that. So we're like, maybe we dive into it. What are they getting at? What's the thing they're, maybe they didn't just communicate it properly, but
Yeah.
what is that concern or what is that thing they're excited about? And then, you know, figuring out the better way of doing it.
Exactly. I mean, it's
Yeah.
good. You want them thinking about that stuff and you want them to
Right.
care about it. I mean, I'm sure
Right.
there's a
Right.
lot of other business leaders who just don't care. They think marketing's overhead or a waste of money or whatever, right? And
Yep.
so in those scenarios, that's probably worse because they're not even giving it a second thought. So I think, the silver lining with that is, yeah, they're caring about it. And so they're coming to you with ideas. They may not be great, but to your point, they're opening that door for conversation. So you say, hey, you saw company A do something. Why are you so excited about that? What do you think that's doing for them? And they'll
Yeah.
tell you. And then you kind of, as you go backwards with that, you say, okay, so is our objective like we want that same outcome? And then again, you can figure out how to do it for you. And maybe it's similar to the way the other company did it, or maybe it's not. But at
Right.
that time, it doesn't. The tactic makes no difference. It's again, what's the objective? How are we going to measure success on that objective, and then figure out the tactics afterwards.
You know, I see a massive trend, right? The smartest people that come on here are always like, what's the goal?
Right.
You know, and you just said it, like, what's the objective? Where are we going? Let's talk about that first and then worry about the hows. I don't know. Is it fun to talk about the hows? Like, oh, we could cookie people and we could try this new retargeting thing on them that I heard
It,
about and business
it
wise.
is. I mean, I think it is, but that's like step 10, right? And so
Yeah,
people
right.
people will do that step one. I've been in so many meetings, again, at other companies I've worked for, and even partnering with some other of my peers who are kind of saying, hey, I'm working on this thing. Can you give me some thoughts on it? And the first topic of conversation is like, okay, so should we do Facebook or not? Should we do, like, it's very tactical.
Yeah.
And they haven't even defined a goal yet. And I think the risk with starting with the tactics is now your measurables are going to be very focused on the tactics. So,
Mm.
for example, if you say, all right, we need to do Facebook, whatever that means. So maybe it's running ads, maybe it's just posting organically. Um, so
Well, hold on a
just by
second. Isn't that just like the worst place to start?
well, I mean, maybe not. I guess it depends on it. Again, depends on what your objective is. It could be the
Right.
perfect place. It could be the only place that you play, but it also could be a place you avoid. You don't know yet. So, just by jumping in the water, saying, "All right, you know what? I'm going to do Facebook, no matter what. I'm doing Facebook. I'm committed to that." Now, by default, your tactics are going to be Facebook driven. Like, you're going to have likes and comments and views be your main measure of success.
I
But
get
that
it.
none of
Yeah.
those mean you sold anything. It just means someone kind of engaged with your funny video or your post or whatever it was. So, that's the risk. And that's the same example if you just focus on email, open rate, click through rate, but you're not looking at anything valuable to the business. So you need to start with your objective. You have your measurables for that.
Right.
And then you come up with what we would call like campaigns. So like what's the content messaging to drive that behavior? And then within the campaign, you're going to have a bunch of tactics, and maybe Facebook and email is a tactic, maybe it's not.
Right.
And you'll have what I call vanity metrics. You'll have these tactical metrics that are maybe just indicators that people are engaging with your content, but are no means an indication that your campaign was successful or your objective was met, right? Because you could have a post and have millions of views and millions of likes, and it goes viral, but no one buys from you. People, when you mention your brand to them, they're still like, yeah, I don't know anything about that brand. They just posted
Yeah.
that one video that I saw. Like, I don't even know what they sell. And so it's kind of like, well, was that worth it? And maybe some people would say it is, and that's fine. But so I don't think it is. I think you, again, just focus on the high level objective of what do you want to
Sure.
do, right?
And probably not the phrase, we should do TikTok. You know, it's probably
Oh,
not.
I know. I think I've been asked that. Same with like Snapchat when that first came out,
Right.
right? They were like, "Oh, we should do Snapchat." I'm like, "Do you even know what that is?" Like, they're like, "No, but my daughter uses it." It's like, or do we sell to your daughter? Like, if that's if that's not your
Right.
target demo, then why are you even entertaining this? So I think,
Yeah. Do daughters buy $80,000 boats? No. Like,
yeah,
or
right,
whatever the case is. Like,
or
no.
whatever it is. It's like, no way. So why would you even care to do that? And yeah, I don't know. I think the tactic piece and like kind of going for the new shiny object, whatever that
Hmm.
may be, whether that's a tactic, maybe it's a tool. Again, you kind of mentioned it earlier, like you have all these companies pitching their various tools for their, sales cloud or marketing cloud or whatever it might be. And a lot of the tools are great. A lot of the tools are just average. Like there's millions of other tools that can do that. I remember seeing a visual representation of like, I forget how far it went back, maybe like 5 years ago or not even that far, where there were like maybe a couple hundred digital
Mm-hmm.
tools, and like now there's hundreds of thousands. If I mean, I'm pretty sure it'll be millions soon. You have all these startups, and if
Right.
you look at all those tools, like there's a lot of tools that essentially do the same thing with plus or minus one little unique feature, which usually isn't a game changer. It's just, I put the button here instead of there, so it's easier, right? Something simple like that.
Right.
And so I think people will see or hear about these new tools and just be like, I need that tool. That's going to be the magic bullet that's going to make all my problems go away. And I guarantee you it won't. If you don't have a strategy, if you don't have an objective, if you don't have messaging and content figured out, you're not measuring anything, that whatever tool you have, whatever channel you use, you're going to fail, right? I always compare it to, the metaphor I use is, if you were trying to build two houses next to each other, same exact spec, same everything, same materials of wood or whatever, and you had one construction crew that knew what they were doing. They had a strategy and a plan in place, but they had like the shittiest hammer. They had a hand saw that was rusty. Their nails were just scattered on the floor, not organized. You had that crew there. And then you had another crew who never built a house in their life, but they had the best hammer. Everything was organized, Six Sigma style. They had the newest electric saw. Who do you think is going to build a better house? The first people who know what the
Yeah.
hell they're doing, because they're going to make it work with whatever shitty tools you give them. Now, if you give
Yeah.
them the nicer tools, great. They're going to do it a little faster, a little more efficient, but they're still going to have the best result at the end of the day. Because in the second example, you're going to have these people who have never built a house before just
Yeah. It's like,
trying to
dude,
figure
it's
this
like me
out.
looking at like a amazing, really expensive toolbox. I don't even know what I'm looking at. And it's like,
Right.
hi, Casey, build a floor joist. I'm like, what?
Yeah, and you're just gonna do your best of what you think that should be, and it's
Right.
probably not gonna be structurally sound. It's
Not up
probably
to
gonna look
code for
like
sure.
garbage.
Yeah.
No, and but you have the best tools, right? You
Yeah.
invested in the best tool, and it's like, well, that doesn't mean success. Where the other guy had like a rock instead of a hammer, and he built the awesome house because he knows what he's doing. He had a plan.
Yeah.
And so I think if you relate that to back to marketing, it's very very similar. If you don't have smart people coming up with the strategy and having a plan, the tools and the tactics don't even matter.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter at all, right? Again, the other one I'll use is like, if you're, people always on the tool thing, right? They'll say, oh, well, I have the best account, or marketing automation tool or whatever
Sure.
it's going to be. It's like, all
Funnel.
right, well, that your competitors have that too, right? Or they can. It's not
That's true,
proprietary.
man. That's
So
true.
it's like, okay, so now you and I both. So what I relate that to is like, okay, you and I both have the same like Ferrari, right? Whatever it
Yeah.
is, and we race. One of us is going to win, right? Like someone's
Right.
going to be the better driver,
Right.
right? And we have the exact same car. So it's the same thing. So if I have this marketing automation tool and my competitors have the exact same one, if I'm confident that I'm the better driver with that, then I'm going to win, right?
Yeah.
And maybe even I'm such a good driver that you can be in a Ferrari and I can be in a Honda Civic and I'll still win,
Right.
right?
Right. Because a lot of people in the Ferraris keep it on first gear.
Yeah, you don't know what you're doing. You're going to pedal to the metal. You're going to
Yeah.
crash. You're going to spin out. You don't know what you're doing. And I'm going to be in the Honda Civic and and I'm going to
Hit
go and I'm going to win,
a little
right?
nitrous.
Yeah, maybe a little too fast, too furious, and Tokyo Drift, and and I think that's what I'm saying. I think that's how I kind of think about all these things. It's
Yeah.
just when the topics of tools come up, of like, hey, have you heard about this? We should really do that, or the tactical thing of like, hey, we should get on TikTok. I relate it back to those two examples where it's like, if we don't have a plan, this isn't going to work. We're going to burn a lot of time and money. We're
Yeah.
not going to see the results. You're then going to think that that's a stupid tactic or tool, and it may not be. It may be me because I didn't have a plan, and I'm just blindly trying to do something with this tool or tactic, right?
All right.
Yeah.
Man. And I guess to take it a step further, if you gave that crew with a shitty gear really good tools, they might actually use them, build it faster. But they may not use them. But it's like,
That's
okay,
right.
but use them if you have them. And
That's the
you need to
thing.
know
So like
how.
that's like the master level, right? So if you
Yeah.
have the solid strategy and maybe you have a shoestring budget, you don't have a lot of
Yeah.
people on your team, but they're smart. you're going to get stuff done and you're going
Right.
to be successful. Now, if they end up getting a bunch of budget, a bunch of headcount, a bunch of awesome tools and tech, well, now they're going to be the best in class because you
Right.
just gave these really smart people the best Ferrari or the best saw that you can possibly give them. So they're going to be very efficient, and it's going to be the best that they can do with it. But you need that foundational element there, and I think a lot of times that's lacking. And there's a lot of people that hide behind the tool or the tactic. And I mean, sometimes people get lucky, right? There'll be people who don't know anything about marketing. They don't have a plan. They do run a LinkedIn ad or a Facebook ad, and it, for whatever reason it works. They just hit the lottery. Um, and then maybe they'll just rinse and repeat that and they're fine, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that's 1 in a million. That's very uncommon for that to happen. And even in that scenario, they're hiding behind that platform because if you were to give them another challenge or they move to another job, well, that's not going to necessarily work. So that if that's their go-to, they're going to
Yeah.
maybe fail the second time around and say, "Oh crap, I really don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know how to evaluate what tactic or tool I should be doing."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, where do you think this goes in the future? What are you excited about coming around the bend?
Um, I don't know. I feel like technology changes so much that there's going to be things like 6 months from now that aren't even in my head right now. But I mean, I think the AI and machine learning stuff is very interesting. I think as that matures, I kind of think of it as like it's like a baby, right? So like you can get some pretty cool things. I've seen some examples of, and it's so early on where it's not usable, but there was, I can't remember if it was either AI or machine learning because they are different, but it was basically taking a phrase or a topic and basically writing content for you.
Hmm.
So you would say, I don't know, again, back to like fishing or something. It would write a whole like a bunch of paragraphs about fishing, and you would read them. Again, it's so early on. You read them and say, all right, well, some of this is fishing, but some of this is like way off base. Like
Yeah,
they're
it's like
talking about Russia here, and
weird
like I don't even
content.
know, that's not
Yeah.
even relevant, right? And then, but the stuff that was relevant to fishing, you would like go to Google it, and it's like that content doesn't exist. Like it's not like it was going to find content, piece it together. It
Right.
wrote its own content like a human would. And so I think when that gets to the point where as a marketer, that would be amazing. You just literally put in a topic or a product and it writes the content for you and it's pretty solid. And
Yeah.
maybe you just have to kind of tweak it. I think that's going to be kind of very interesting and kind of see where that goes. I think that's because I think content's a piece where a lot of companies struggle. It's tough. If you don't
Yeah.
have content writers or if you don't outsource to the right people to do that, you can fall short, even if you have the right tools and the right budget. So
I
if
think
there is
journalists really don't have a job.
Right. Well, that's the other thing. Yeah. Well, then you're gonna be the one reviewing it, right? I guess you're gonna have maybe
Yeah.
maybe less work to do. But I think I don't know. I think that was something that when I saw that or heard about that, I was like, huh, that's a very interesting use case for that. For that. I mean, a lot of people with the AI machine learning automatically go to data and analytics, right? Saying,
Yeah.
hey, I mean, we do the same thing, right? We have millions of rows of data. We need, there's no way a person can go through all that and get insight out of it. So we need basically a computer to do it for us and
Yeah.
give us recommendations and insights. And there's a lot of tools that do that, and we use them today, and they're fairly accurate. And again, you can teach them and get them to be better. Yeah. So if you think about the other ways that AI can be used or machine learning can be used, I think it gets very, very interesting. If you think about
Yeah.
all of the steps and the processes that a marketing person has to take to from start to finish.
Yeah.
And you think about, again, usually AI is at the end with the data and the analytics, but it's like, how can you put it through that whole process? I
Yeah.
always joke
Really.
around like digital marketers are the laziest people because we just want to automate our jobs,
Uh,
right? So like, I'd rather work 100 hours a week for 10 years so I can work 20 hours a week for the rest of my life because I'm going to
nice.
automate all my work, right? So I'd rather just not sleep for years just so I can automate it and just kind of have it on autopilot, so to speak. So that's always the joke I have, and I think it's somewhat accurate. At least for me, I try to automate as much as I can. So if you think about putting in AI and machine learning into these other steps, maybe you do automate things, or you save time because now you're getting insights,
Hmm.
recommendations. Um, Maybe it's even doing the work for you to a certain degree, and then you're just kind of spot checking it. Who knows where this stuff's going to go and how fast it kind of snowballs or escalates. Once there's something kind of cool there. But
Right. It's like, when do we get warp drive?
yeah. Well, then everyone always worries about like the Skynet situation too. It gets so smart that takes you down, which I suppose is like it's possible. Like just if you think
Yeah.
about everything's tied into computers and electronics, I suppose that's very very probable at some point. But I think from a marketing standpoint, you're pretty safe.
Yeah, I don't know if Skynet takes over, but I could see like a virus that's machine learning. That might be a bad day.
That would be very interesting though, like almost like a disease, like
Like
a disease that
like a
just
COVID
keeps
virus,
like a
but it's
COVID that different strains and keeps evolving.
yeah,
Could you imagine a virus that just never goes away? You can't get rid of it. That would be
right.
very interesting. I'm sure someone's working on that.
In some layer
I'm
somewhere
sure there's
or
someone
some
in someone's
government
basement
funded
trying to figure that
place
out.
somewhere. Yeah.
I'm sure someone's trying to figure that out. But yeah, I think that's interesting. I think the other risk too, I mean, we're kind of getting on a different topic now, is like, the COVID stuff is, obviously scary and terrible, but I mean, I could think of a worse scenario, which is, just the power grid going down for months.
Uh-huh.
So imagine someone hacking that. I mean, that happened back in 2005. I forget when that happened I was in Detroit at the time, and like, I don't know if it was like half the country or a portion of the country, the power was out for like 4 or 5 days straight. There
Mm,
was something where the power grid went out, and just imagine that happening for the whole country for 2 months. I mean, it'd be chaos. Like nothing would work. You'd have no
yeah.
internet, no cell phone towers, no electricity. You literally couldn't do anything. Food would go bad. Like that would be terrible. Like a week of that would be almost impossible. Like that would be a nightmare. So you got to think, on the technology stuff that you mentioned, the virus thing, but just like the hackability of it, or just it going down. If you were so reliant
Right.
on the AI or on whatever it is to do your work or do your job, and it just power goes out, you're done,
Yeah.
right? It's like the equivalent of someone getting sick and can't go to work that day. Like your robots are sick, the power's out. They can't they can't operate your assembly line. They can't, whatever it's
Hmm.
going to be. Everything kind of comes to a halt. So it's kind of
Yeah. Now you got everyone listening buying guns and buying gold and
that's right. Yeah, do
fallout
that,
shelter
guys.
somewhere.
Guys, if you're listening, buy as many guns and get as much gold as you can.
Yeah. I don't know
Uh,
how much gold, but maybe it's ramen. You trade ramen.
yeah, what are you going to do with gold? I mean,
What are you gonna do with it?
no one's going to care about gold. That's not, yeah, it'd be food, ramen, beans. Yeah,
Right.
make a garden.
Ammo.
I don't know. Ammo. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
But it's an interesting point. I think COVID, um, not as bad as maybe a Spanish flu situation because, and this is all relative, but because we can all work from home.
Mhm.
If we couldn't work from home, like back in the day when at AOL, you're not working from home, then what are you doing now? Now people really aren't being productive. But I think we've all found,
Yeah.
a lot of us have found a way to be productive at home. And then you just feel bad for people that can't, like the restaurants and that kind
Oh,
of thing.
there's a
But
lot, yeah,
yeah,
manufacturing or anyone where you physically have to be there and build something or do something. You
yeah,
gotta figure out the safest way to do that. I mean, and
right,
even in March, there were periods where I think like weeks or months went by where they were like, everything stopped because like you couldn't go to the manufacturing plant and turn a
right,
wrench and make something. So that was just on hold for months. And
yeah,
that trickle down affects everything, right? You don't realize it. Same, the restaurants was a good example. It's like, okay, I can't go out to eat, but it's like whoever provide, like farmers who provide food to this company that then gives it to the
yeah,
restaurant, like no one's buying that. And then you say, okay, well, what does a farmer buy? They buy equipment. Well, they're not going to buy any equipment now. Who
right,
makes equipment? Well, those people are laid off. It just keeps going,
yeah. It's so
right?
connected, right? It's
Everything's
crazy.
connected. It's so crazy. And so, you think about, okay, in this situation, let's just pretend that all of our manufacturing and transportation, like freight, was all AI, self-driving, robots made everything, no humans. Maybe there's a guy at home on his computer that's diagnosing and fixing the robots and
Right.
stuff. Does that solve the problem? I mean, maybe in this scenario it helps, but back again, okay, power goes out or virus takes over, or infects the equipment or something. Well, now you're in essentially the same boat. Like all that
Hmm.
comes to a halt and nothing happens. So I don't think there's like any. I don't know. It's kind of try not to think about it, but I mean, who would have thought that this would be happening now anyway, right?
Yeah.
So,
You got me thinking. How long does ramen last? Does it just
uh,
last?
you know what? I think it's like Twinkies. Like it probably has a very long
Gonna
expiration
Google
date,
this.
but it also probably won't kill you if you eat it past that. I can't.
Uh,
There's nothing. I
see,
don't
how
know.
long does ramen last? Instant ramen noodles. That's what we're talking about. Best
20
by
years.
1 year. Mm,
1 year. Oh
does
man,
it
I
go
definitely
bad
have
though?
ramen in my cupboard that's more than a year old. I
Maybe that's
guarantee
where
I do,
a
and I'll
lot of
eat
your
it.
magic powers come from. Do
Oh,
ramen
you think
noodles
this?
go bad? Um, gonna have to research this further, how to store them. But if they're just the instant dry ones, as long as you keep them dry, then why
That's
wouldn't they
right.
just last forever?
I think they would. I think they would provide some nutritional value
Yeah. I
even
mean, I get
20
the
years down the
official
road.
like eat them soon so you can buy more, but
Well, and it's probably not going to taste. It's probably Best Buy, right? It won't taste as great,
right.
but they're still edible. Give you nutrients.
I see. While the noodles will definitely keep good quality for a few months past the date, they degrade over time and definitely won't last forever. Is that
I
a
mean that.
marketer talking? Is that a
Yeah,
marketer?
that sounds like it. So you're telling me in 5 years that package just going to be like it's just disappeared? It's dust. It just turns to
Right.
nothing.
It's like from
I'm sure
Indiana
there's still
Jones.
noodles in there that I can
Indiana
chomp
Jones
on.
just dust just trickles out.
Yeah, right.
You could eat the dust. Couldn't you eat the dust? I
I would
mean,
eat the dust. I would eat the dust.
ramen dust
I would eat the
now
dust.
on sale in the
Yeah.
Casey and Nick's apocalyptic
Hey,
food
start a new
mart.
business, man. Ramen
Yeah,
dust.
man.
Sounds cool.
So cool. So now we know about ramen, and
Great.
now we're a
That was a
little freaked
concern.
out for the future. But quantum computing, right? We got
Yeah, I mean, I
computers
think
thinking really fast.
that's kind of, I think to me, kind of on the same track of the AI and machine learning. It's like even our fastest computers now, it still takes, maybe hours to run very advanced algorithms and things like that. And so, and I know there are quantum computers. I don't know enough about the subject to speak on it deeply, but I know there are computers out there that, can run a process in, 20 minutes that takes normally the smartest computer we had or the best computer we had, days to run. And so
I
it can
just
run
I
in
just
20
googled that because it was a ratio like that, and I didn't
Yeah.
even realize this. 200 seconds that would take the world's best supercomputer 10,000 years to compete.
Yeah. So isn't that crazy that something that would take 10,000 years can be done in 200 seconds?
Like that's a big deal, but I don't
That's
think
a
like
huge
anyone really
deal.
gets that in the news. Like that's not even a ratio. You can't. That's not like a 1 cup of
No.
milk to a gallon of milk. That's like the Earth to the size of the sun kind of thing. Where you're like,
Well,
what?
that's like saying like, oh, you can, have a horse and buggy or, you could teleport. Like they're not at
Right,
all, they're so far from each other, but they're
right.
essentially doing the same thing, point A to point B, just much more faster and efficiently, right? So I think it's just crazy to think. It's hard to even put that in perspective of like what would need to be processed that takes 10,000 years that now we can just do, while we're eating ramen,
Right.
right? And it's
By the time
done.
the ramen noodles
By
are
the time the
ready,
ramen noodles are cooked, it's done. And yeah, that's just crazy to think. And it's going to keep getting faster. So that 200 seconds is going to turn to 10 seconds at some point or
yeah.
turn to almost instantaneous. And then you just got to think of like, well, what are we process? I mean, you could process almost anything at that point,
I
and
think
it's
about like
not new.
medical modeling, tests and
Oh man, and like I said, I'm not smart enough to think about all these other things, but there's so many things that I imagine are very complex that just in a second it can give you the answer there and kind of crunch
yeah.
all the numbers.
I guess the positive news for this is if we get computers like that cranking, then something like COVID comes out, like, hey, machine, figure this shit out. It goes, "Brr, brr, brr," right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
because
yeah,
that's the noise it makes, and it's data
yeah,
center. And then, and then it's like, here's your vaccine, human. And you're like,
yeah.
awesome, thanks.
Or it's the Terminator situation, and where it's like beep bop boop, eliminate humans.
Right? Or it's like,
That's the problem.
I created that virus, Dave.
Yeah.
You're like,
Oh,
damn
that's
it,
right. That's
damn it,
right.
Hal.
That's right. See, it's going to be
Man,
Skynet. But anyway, I think that stuff's very interesting, and it's usually applied to physics and like modeling of the universe and things where there's just so much data, right? But just as a marketer, even it's like, okay, how can I use even a fraction of that for anything, whatever
yeah,
it might be, right?
yeah.
We're usually last on the list to get that technology, I'd imagine. I'm sure
I'm sure finance
physicists and
finance will get it first. All of our
think so.
stock friends in the
Yeah,
market.
yeah.
But then, yeah, eventually it trickles down.
Eventually we'll get it. We'll get a version of it. Yeah,
Yeah, the finance people get it first, and hopefully medical people will get it. And
yeah,
then, yeah, last on the list is like marketing
yeah.
here. Here you
Right.
go. Here you go, marketing.
Yeah. Right.
Well, man, yeah, it's almost like we have like one step back, but potentially two steps forward. Hopefully, with all this stuff going on.
I
So
think so. I think it just all it did to me, and I think I saw a stat on this, but it just accelerated the digital transformation for everybody, right? So if
yeah,
you think about even a restaurant,
that's a
if
good
you were a
point.
restaurant that offered online ordering, curbside pickup, you're
Mm-hmm.
fine. You just pivoted to that and say, all right, I'm going to do, instead of that being 20% of my business, that's now going to be 100% of my business. If you
Yeah.
were a company that didn't do that and you're like, oh shit, I need to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you went out of business. Maybe you just now figured it out and you've lost 4 months of revenue and whatever. And so I think that's all it did. And I think I did see, I'm trying to remember what it was a chart that was showing, oh man, I'm trying to remember now what it was. E-commerce, I think, as far
Okay.
as like percentage of people that buy from just online, or number of online orders globally or something of like that. And it was showing, for the last 5 or 6 years, year over year, going up like, I don't know, 5%, 10%, substantial growth.
Yeah.
And it showed just between like March and now, it went up basically the equivalent of the amount we've went up in the last 10 years. So from
Wow.
whatever was like from 2009 to 2019, that amount of growth happened in the last 4 months. So
Hmm.
like the chart just went like this and then it just went literally straight up. And so it's interesting that it's like, well, yeah, everyone's at home. You can't go to the store, or you couldn't, or people are cautious to go now anyway. Um, and so everyone's buying stuff online, obviously, but you don't realize that the amount of people buying stuff online is like more than the last 10 years of growth that we've seen in e-commerce. So it's just like that happened in everything. So, all it did was just accelerate, it instead of us being there here, we would be here 10 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
right, with those examples, but now we're here right now because we had to.
And that the grocery thing, I'd followed that for a while back in like even my college days, like food.com. People have
Yeah,
been trying to do online delivery of groceries for a long time,
yeah,
and it just didn't stick, probably because there's something to shopping. There's something to walking
you know,
down an aisle.
yeah,
Maybe you'll see an Oreo bag. Maybe you'll throw it in, even though it's not on your list.
right,
So I think there's
right.
some kind of there's an experience to that people
People
want it.
enjoy doing it, I think, and yeah,
Yeah,
you're right. Like all those impulse buys, and like maybe you see something on sale or whatever that you didn't intend to get, and so I think,
right,
and then also if you think about, like, even I'm guilty of this, like the delivery thing's been around for a while, and you're like, all right, so they're going to charge me $10 plus I got to tip the person, so I'm paying like an extra 15 or $20. I could just drive down the street and do it in half an
right,
hour. I'm going to save the $20, right? I'm only going to
right,
buy $80 worth of food. And so, but now it's like, well, I'll pay the 15, $20 because I don't want to go out,
right.
or I can't, or it's not safe or whatever. And so I think it kind of, as I started to use it, I'm like, it is a convenience factor. Like it's easier to do that. And I don't
For
mind
sure.
paying and kind of, you save the money because you don't do the impulse buys. Like you actually have to you're sticking to your
That
list.
you know
So,
what? No one's used that. They should. That's the
right.
marketing right there.
It is
Look,
because I
you're
mean,
gonna spend this fee on something that's gonna make you fat, so skip that and do
right.
this.
You were going to spend that $20 anyway, whether it's on Oreos or ramen or whatever, but now you're not. You're just going to tip the person that delivered it, right? And pay the little delivery
Right.
fee. And then you get your fruits and vegetables and whatever was on your list. So I mean, it
Wow.
kind of, I think it kind of works, and we'll see if it stays around. I don't know, like once everything's kind of, back to as normal as it was, are people just going to revert back, or are people going to say, you know what, I prefer ordering my food online and doing curbside pickup. I don't like sitting at a restaurant, right? And maybe people will start to prefer this, even if the opportunities and options open back up. And I'm just curious to see, does e-commerce and those other things start to like trend down because and get back to maybe what it was like 6 months ago, or is it going to
Hmm.
stay up there and people are like, you know what, I actually prefer this, even though, I don't want to go sit down at a restaurant. I don't want to go pick out my own groceries. I want those delivered to me. It was easy. It was more convenient that way.
Yeah. I wonder if um my gut reaction is it goes back. But if they get enough volume now that it drops that fee, like I'm not gonna pay $20. But
Right.
it so many people are using it. It's integrated with Uber. Like people just get paid, and it's like great, cool. And it's like 10 maybe. Or it's like if there's so much volume that comes from now, and it's cheaper because of that. I think that was the problem in the beginning, like the startup costs of getting this to. I mean, all those startups
Yeah.
lost so much money, but I think maybe the volume might keep it going long term to make it a viable option for people who, well, saving $10 is that. Well, I'll just stay home.
Right. I mean, I think that the play is maybe with the data, right? It's like make it free, but
Oh,
then make them tell you 3 things about themselves or something. And so now if
yeah.
you're the grocery store, I mean, I know grocery stores are actually pretty good at doing this, right? Like they recognize your credit card, that you use
Yeah.
the same credit card, and they know what you bought, but they don't necessarily know anything about you per se. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
they know a little bit if you have like a rewards card or something, but imagine them just asking you like, "Hey, do you have kids? How many kids do you have?" Right? What's your, whatever they want to do, so they can personalize that shopping experience for you online, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
if
It's a
they
great point about the
realize
data. If you can make it free with data or really dumb cheap,
it's
like
worth it for you,
$5 so you don't abuse it, and and maybe a little transaction fee or just something simple, so you get some money, the store has to pay a little bit, and
yeah.
then the rest is just you're selling anonymous data. I mean that's how Facebook and all these other guys do it, you know.
That's well, and I think I heard some, I might be misspeaking here, but I think I heard I think it was Kroger, I want to say, has partnered with or made a deal with Roku, I think, to sell essentially their data to Roku for advertising targeting.
Mm.
So you can say, hey, I'm the whatever company, Nabisco, who makes Cheez-Its, Nabisco, I don't know, whatever,
Nabisco,
Nabisco.
maybe. I don't
Like I'm
know.
Nabisco and I sell Cheez-Its. I want to run a 7-second video ad when people are streaming TV, but only if they bought Cheez-Its in the last 2 weeks. Like
Right.
you can do that now because Kroger's going to tell you, hey, these people bought Cheez-Its in the last 2 weeks, or these people used to buy Cheez-Its and they stopped.
Right.
So let's show them the ad to kind of re-engage. So I think that's starting to happen already, and it's just kind of on that next level. It's like, the more data that a grocery store or any company can capture, yeah, they can use it for themselves, but then they can kind of license it out and kind of use it for these
Yeah.
other things. And I think that's the future. I think I've even heard people talk about Tesla saying like they're not a car company, they're just like a data company. You think about
Oh
they're
yeah.
tracking every brake and acceleration and turn and where you're driving. Like they're capturing all that information, and they can leverage that to make the autonomous driving or to just target whatever they want to do with it. Them making cars isn't their play. That's just like their beta test, just to try the
Right.
technology, collect
Yeah.
the data. They're going to go to like a Ford or someone at some point and be like, here, buy my license, my technology and my data. And they're going to make a boatload of money.
Yeah.
Um,
And then
you know,
everyone has driving cars, and most of them are on that framework.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They'll be like the Google of or whatever. Like they'll be
Yeah.
the leading, whatever that data source is that drives those things. And so I think that's what their play is, and they're just kind of playing around with different uh, you know, transportation models to get that
Maps,
data.
data, everything.
Yeah, they're just messing around with it, which is smart. So I think any data's the play. I mean, you mentioned like Google and Facebook. I mean, that's how they make all their money, right? It's data. Like their services are
Yeah.
free. You don't pay to use Google. You don't pay to use Facebook, right? As a
Gmail.
consumer,
Yeah.
yeah, it's all free. But they're collecting data and they sell it, and that's definitely the future.
Sick, man. You know, apparently it's Kellogg that owns Cheez-Its.
Oh, sorry, Nabisco.
Sorry, Nabisco. But Nabisco is in our hearts. I think they make this is like a
To
food chain.
me, Nabisco makes Cheez-Its. I don't care what
They make
anyone
the graham
says.
crackers,
They do. They do.
you know. I don't know what else they make, but they do
Yeah.
make graham crackers. That's about all I can. But dude, who are you? How did this has been such a good conversation. Like,
Yeah.
what's your background? Take me back, like little Nick days. Like, what was it like? Where'd you grow up? What was it like? Did you
Yeah.
always know you're gonna be in marketing? And did you have this sort of like really cool approach to everything?
Yeah, so I was actually born in Alabama. I think we only lived there for like six. I don't remember it, right? So I
You
was
don't
born
remember?
there.
Yeah, same. I was
No, in
born in
six.
Virginia. Don't
Yeah,
remember it. Yeah.
I think I was like 6 months and my parents moved. We moved to Lexington, Kentucky, which is not much different, I think, maybe than Alabama. Still in the South. And then maybe when I was about 3 or 4 years old, we moved to Seattle, Washington, or
Wow.
actually Bellingham, Washington, to be very specific. It's about like an hour-ish, 2 hours north of Seattle. So we lived there for a while. That's most of my childhood was being in Washington until maybe I was in, I think maybe fifth grade. And I think I remember very specifically, like in the middle of fifth grade is when we moved to just outside of Detroit. My dad got a job. He's an engineer. He got a job at Ford, so we moved.
What
And
you say?
so
Where? You
he worked for Ford at the
Oh,
time.
Ford.
So that was the job offer that got him there.
Dude,
And
that
then
sounds sucky though. Moving when you're in fifth grade.
it was right in the middle too, right? So it was like I
Ah,
I remember it was like whatever October. Yeah, it sucked as a kid. I just remember like all my friends were there. Like you went kindergarten to fifth grade was in Washington, right? And you're like,
yeah.
okay, I gotta go, right? So So we moved, and
And
Detroit's
Detroit
way
too.
different.
Sorry,
Ugh,
Detroit, but
yeah, it's
Detroit,
not
you know,
great.
like
And just it's just way different. Like that Midwest, it's just way different from the mountain views and like the
oh yeah,
forest and
reindeer
like,
on
oh,
a
it was
clear
so
day.
great. There'd
Yeah.
be reindeer in our front yard eating grass. I remember seeing that as a kid. Like
Wow.
where we lived, it was, I think, Mount Baker, like an hour drive. We were up there sledding and snowboarding and
So
stuff.
cool.
So back to Detroit, where it's just flat and just like concrete and whatever. But so we did that, and then we were there for. I mean, I live in Indiana now. I moved here about 3 years ago, so I've been in the Detroit area for 20 something years, right, for most of my life. And like I would say, like in high school, just like average performer, just like nothing, like B's, couple C's,
What had your
like
interest in high
an
school? Like,
A.
sounds like it wasn't school.
No, not really. Basketball. I played a lot of basketball.
Nice.
I think I did that
Are
probably
you
more than
tall?
anything.
It seems like you're
No,
probably
I'm
tall.
not. I'm not.
No?
I'm 5'9".
Oh, okay.
So I'm not very
It's all
tall, but
relative,
it is
The 5'2" person's
I was
like,
fast. I had a
"Who are
good.
you?"
I had good shots. I was decent, right? So we played a lot, and then I wasn't really big into like video game. A lot of my friends were into video games and things like that. Not me,
Yeah.
not so much. I play for like 30 minutes and just be like, this isn't productive. Like I'm not getting anything out. This isn't productive to me. Like if I win the game or not, like nothing happens. Or at least with basketball, I'm like, I'm in shape. I'm getting better at it. I enjoy, I like playing it, whatever. Um, that was kind of it. And then I would say even like senior year of high school, when you start thinking about like where are you going to go to college, what do you want to do? I had no freaking idea. Like I had no idea. I mean, my dad was an engineer, so I was kind of like, all right, maybe I'll do that. Like that, you seem to make a decent amount of money doing that. I was decent at physics and math. Like again, B's. I was like, I could do this. And so I started taking, maybe like some physics classes and advanced math classes. I was like, yeah, this isn't. I don't like this. Like I
Not
was
it.
okay at it. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't like I was terrible at it, but I just didn't like it. It wasn't fun. It wasn't creative enough. Um, so what I was doing was my first 2 years of college, I went to like a community college. I stayed living at home just to save money, right? And so I was working like at a shoe store part time, going to community college full time. The first year is just like English and like basic classes and
Mhm.
trying to figure out what you want to do. And so kind of what I was doing on the side was I was doing graphic design work. So I had
Hmm.
figured out pretty quickly that it was pretty easy for me to learn like Photoshop and do graphic design. And so
Nice.
the niche that I had in the Detroit area was I would target all of the bands and musicians and DJs in the area that were promoting parties and coming out with albums and CDs, and I would design their CD covers, I would design their flyers for their to promote their parties, and I was making way more than I did at the shoe store, and it was enough to pay for college basically. So I never had any student loans because I was able to kind of hustle on the side and make enough
That's a lot of hustling,
for
man.
each semester. It was, yeah. I mean, I would just, come home and just start doing graphic design stuff and make enough to pay for each semester. And just, that wasn't my plan. Like, I didn't think like, oh, I'll make enough to pay for college. I just happened to have just enough to be like, oh, I don't have
Yeah.
to take out a loan. I actually have, whatever the $1,200 I need for these two classes. And then I have
Right. The payment.
$800 for the
Right.
books and just like little step by step. So I did that. And then, I think after the first year, it's like, all right, I got to figure out what I want to do. It's definitely not engineering. And digital marketing wasn't a job, wasn't a term, wasn't a thing. Um, there were marketing classes, but they were more like they called them advertising classes. It was
Yeah.
more about content,
The three P's,
messaging.
the four P's,
Yeah, the four
yeah.
P's. It was like, messaging, like having an emotional angle to it or a rational angle to it. So it was more the creative writing
Yeah.
and things like, okay, this is, you're going to make something that goes on a billboard or goes in a magazine. I think maybe one teacher mentioned email marketing for like 10 seconds. And then that was the only digital thing they never mentioned websites.
Yep.
They didn't mention anything. And so I said, okay, I do the graphic design stuff, making some money there. I'm decent at that. Kind of into the advertising thing. I'll go get a degree in marketing and or business. I forget what it was. I think it was business with like a secondary degree in marketing or whatever it was.
Okay.
So I did that. So I was like, all right, I'll just try that and see whatever. And so I started doing that. I did that. So I ended up getting my business and marketing degree. And I think I graduated at the worst time. It was 2008. So there was literally no jobs. So I graduated. I have my degree. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get a job now, make a lot of money. I was still working at the shoe store, still doing the graphic design on the side. Um, not, for 2 years, I think it took me 2 years to find a job just because the economy was so bad. So I was like, this is bullshit. I got this college degree and spent all this money and I'm still working at the shoe store. So 2 years later, I got a job working for a company doing like online virtual webinars, essentially, like kind of managing those. And it was a little taste of marketing, right? Like you do the graphic, you did everything, right? So you did the
Yeah.
graphic design for the banners, you promoted the webinar, you were the guy recording it when they were speaking, and then you would edit it, and then you'd email it out,
Yeah.
and then repeat. You would just do that all day. And so I remember the first 2 months, I'm like, oh, I love this, is awesome. And then 6 months in, I'm like, this sucks. I don't want to do this forever. Like, this is so repetitive and easy. Like, after 2 months, I mastered whatever that process was. And I'm
Mhm.
like, this can't be what marketing is. I hate this. Um,
Right?
yeah, I was like, oh, I hate this. And then I saw a job posting and it was with Cummins and I was like, I'll apply. I didn't qualify at all, I don't think, based on the job title, but I ended up getting the job and I've been at Cummins ever since. It's been over 10 years now. But even during that time when I first started there, I had a regular marketing job, trade shows, printing fly, just basic
Mhm.
stuff. And this was right again, 2011 ish, I think, maybe 2010, right at the time when social media was starting to take off for businesses, right? So it was pretty new and fresh. Um, Email marketing was maybe pretty solid. Websites were pretty, like, usually controlled by an IT department at most companies. Marketing
Right.
didn't really have control over them yet. So this was like prime time for digital marketing to start to take off. And I knew enough about IT, just kind of, again, in my own, just messing around with computers and programming stuff and whatever, where, a couple of months in, I think I went to my boss at the time and was like, hey, can I redesign our website? And I know you guys want an app to do something. Can I try to just develop the app? I'll do it in
Mhm.
addition to my work. Like I'll finish my work plan, but I'll do this on the side. And they're like, yeah, like, whatever, kid, just try it, whatever. And so I ended up doing it and it was successful. And that's how I started to get attention, and people started to say, oh, this guy kind of knows what he's talking about with this thing. And I just kind of stayed on top of it. And really a lot of it was self-taught because I didn't learn any of this in college.
Yeah, same.
So this is all self-taught. I'd go to YouTube and learn things. I'd go to these forums or blogs and learn things. I would just trial and error and experiment with things. I was just very curious about it all. And
Mhm.
so, doing that for 5 years, at that point, I was pretty solid then. Like, if you think about people who were in the digital marketing space, I knew a lot compared to everyone because I kind of started at ground zero when everyone else did. So I had just as much experience as anyone else in the space at the time. And so just, again, you continuing to do that. And even to this day, I still just constantly playing around and on my own time, I'm just curious. I'm interested in this stuff. So I'm always looking
Mhm.
at new technologies, whether it's related to marketing or not. And just, I have to understand how things work. So I remember even when I would, smartphones, I remember when smartphones first came out, you used to have the flip phone, or you could use text and call, and then you got the iPhone or whatever. And I'm like, okay, so when I open this app, like, what's happening? What's actually work? What's making that thing work?
Wow.
And when I integrate it, and like when I click here and it opens up to my email, like, how does it know to send it to my email? And I was always curious about how it works. So I would just try to discover and learn how that worked. And kind of once I understand the fundamentals, I was like, okay, I have a bunch of cool ideas now, because now I know kind of the back end of how the wires get crossed and like what you plug into what. Now the creative side of me is like, okay, as a user, I would love to be able to do this, and no one's doing that. So how do I figure that out and reverse engineer it, right? So that's what I do today, right? I just try to, I have a problem. I know the back end of how things work, and so I just solve the problem that way. And then if
Wow.
that thing, once I've solved the problem and I know what the solution is, I then say, okay, does that solution already exist? And let me go fish around for it, or is this something I need to make, or is it like a combination of both? Right. And so that's kind of been my approach. And I think I have people, talk to me a lot who are earlier in their careers, and they're like, I want to do what you do, or I want to, work on a team like yours, or even, have your type of job at some point. You know, what classes did you take, or what school did you
Uh-huh.
go to? And I'm like, nothing, man. Like, school didn't teach me this. I've taken some classes here and there, but again, they're high level fundamental things. I said, it's just go try it. You've
Mhm.
never ran a Facebook ad before? Go put $20 towards a Facebook ad, set it up and run a Facebook ad and just see what happens. Just
Yeah.
try it. And so I think I would recommend that to anybody. Just try it. And you're going to fail I failed a bunch of times just trying things. But 10 years later, and every now and then we still fail. And I think that's fine. I think when you fail with something, you've learned something. And so that's
Yeah.
totally okay. And that's when you're on the front, the front cutting edge of technology, and you're first, usually it's the first guy who trips and falls over the rock. Like, no one knows the rock's there, but and so now you figured it out. So everyone else knows the rock's there. They're not going to trip over it, but you did. And so now you're a little more cautious of rocks, right? But
Yeah.
then you can hit your head on a branch, and okay, I got
I'm
to watch
sure
out for
like the
branches
first
too.
caveman and woman that were trying to cook with a fire burn themselves and we're like, that was a
Yeah,
bad idea. What can
yeah,
we do differently? It's all about
it's
learning. Uh,
exactly
I
it.
love I love this advice though, in the path you're taking around, just like go do it. That's the way that I learned. That's all I can tell you to do is to go learn it. But
Right.
the question then, if I could send you back in time with that time machine, and you go back and talk to yourself, you just graduated from school. If you could tell yourself any kind of advice, what kind of things would you tell yourself, knowing all these things you've experienced? And
I think that, I thought about this before. I don't know if I would change much. I think I have a combination of the, some sort of skill set, whether it was self-taught or whatever. It lucky I had a combination of kind of advertising, marketing, IT skill set, that who would have thought that those two things together equal digital marketing? Like,
right,
just lucky that I
yeah,
had both of those skills that I could combine. Also, just timing. I think a lot of it's just right place, right time, just lucky, kind of, to a certain degree, right? Like,
yeah,
I knew the stuff. I just happened to be in the right environment. For whatever reason, I happened to apply for that specific job. I had the opportunity to try. Like, who would have known? Who, if I didn't apply for that job and I ended up working somewhere? Who knows what I would be doing
yeah,
now? Right? Who knows?
yeah,
I think the only thing that I maybe would have done a little differently is, especially back then, right now I'm married, I have 3 kids, but like back then I didn't have any of those, and I was just single, and I probably would have tried to, like, maybe start my own business.
hmm,
Like, I would have maybe said, hey, you know what, these tools or this thing doesn't exist, just try to make it, man. While you're doing this graphic design stuff and you got some time to burn between school and work, like, go develop an app and try to sell it or do something, like, be a little
yeah,
more motivated in that space. I think at the time I either didn't even cross my mind or I didn't even think about it.
hmm.
So that would be one thing I could go back to, like, hey man, go try to invent something or make something, because then maybe that could have been, I could just, the whole trap of being like an entrepreneur maybe could have happened or something.
It's
I
funny
don't
you say
know.
that because your description earlier of the graphic side and then the creative side, and then looking at what's inside the app, why does it do that? So you could come up with some different ones. I was like, okay, sounds like a entrepreneur to me. It sounds like someone who's about to build something. So I'd be surprised if you didn't think about doing that in the future. Have you thought about any kind of
It's
like
always crossing my mind.
yeah,
Yeah, I've always had ideas for things. Yeah, and it's kind of, I blame myself, right? Like, I don't know if it's laziness or not, but like, I'll have an idea for something, like, man, that'd be cool, and I'll just move past it. And then
totally.
like 8 years later, someone will bring it to market. I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh shit, I think one of the things, and I'm not saying I came up with this idea first by any means, but I remember back in 2008-ish or something, I had a thought of, like, we were somewhere, we were ordering food, and like, we could only get delivery from pizza places. Like, I don't want pizza. I can only
Right.
do pizza and Jimmy John's or something.
Right.
And I said, why can't I just, like, have some guy go and pick up Chinese food for me and bring it to me?
Right.
So Grubhub, essentially, or
Right.
DoorDash, right? And I
Okay.
kind of had that, and I was like, man, that'd be cool if you just had an app where you could, like, literally order from any restaurant. They'd just, like, a guy would get it and I'd pay him $5 to do that. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever, that's stupid. And then we moved past it. And then,
Totally.
DoorDash, Grubhub, I forget when
Totally.
they
I'm
were
with you,
created,
man.
but
Great to meet you. You
yeah,
invented Grubhub. I invented Uber, right? Friend and I
right.
were like, we should make an app that hails a cab, right? We should do that. Well, and we're like, what would you call it? We had some silly names. Then we
Yeah.
just dropped the topic altogether.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because you're like, yeah, it takes a lot of time and energy, and it may not
Yeah.
work. But like, and again, so maybe I don't have the motivation enough to like dedicate years to trying to do it. But I don't know. It's one of those things. So I try to come up with ideas, and I have a lot of them, and then some of them now it's different with
Yeah.
wife and kids and work, and you don't have as much free time. And I
For
know that's
sure.
not an excuse, because I know there's people who would just say, well, don't sleep and do it. But maybe I
I
just
know.
don't have the passion enough to
Yeah.
truly
Well,
invest all my time into it. But
you got the passion, but like you just
yeah.
needed to align to an idea. And I think what you're talking about though, I do that too, but I think it's actually a good thing. It's almost like a natural filter
Hmm.
so that you don't go quit your job and go crazy off of just a whimsical idea. Like
Right.
that idea has to sort of like be in there
Yeah.
and keep bothering you until eventually you're like, I got to do something about this. Otherwise it's going to drive me crazy. And
Yeah.
then like that passion and the purpose is sort of intersected, you know?
I think you're right. And that would have been, again, my advice to my younger self. It's like, go just make whatever. Like, you're living at
Yeah.
home, you have no expenses. Like, you could make a bunch of things and they all bomb, but it doesn't matter. Like, you're not
Hmm.
supporting a family, and you don't have a mortgage or anything. So that would have been the time to kind of play around and experiment with building something. And I didn't. So I think that would be the only kind of thing where I'd go back and say, hey man, go try to, some of those stupid ideas that you think you have, go try to make some of those. Cause who
Yeah.
knows what those would have turned out to be.
Yeah, dude. Crazy. Crazy. Well, you
Yeah.
need to call me, email me when you're ready to do something like that. We'll go
Yeah,
make our
man.
own. We won't copy them, but like a demand jump, get a little idea going, make that thing
Yeah.
happen, man. Let's
Yeah,
do
for
it.
sure. For sure.
Well, hey, how can people connect with you?
LinkedIn's probably the best.
Yeah.
LinkedIn's probably the best. I'm fairly active on there, and so just sending me a note on there is usually a
Yeah.
pretty easy way to
Don't
get
be
in
a
touch.
weirdo and just send a connection request like all the spammers
Yeah,
out
send me some sort of give me some context to
there. Need some
who you
love.
are and why we need to be connected, right?
Right.
And don't make it be a sales pitch either, because I'm not in for it. It's not.
Yeah.
I usually delete those immediately if
Do you
it's like,
delete? Because
yeah.
I do the report and block. So it's like you're
Oh,
dead to me
I don't know.
and you've
I
been
don't. I
reported.
should start doing that. No, I don't do. I don't take it that far. I'll just ghost them and delete it. If they're persistent though, then maybe I do block them or
I'm just
something.
trying to
But
give them a little social signaling saying, nope.
yeah,
And then now we can never be friends because you'll
yeah.
never find me on LinkedIn and I'll never find you.
Well, and when you take that approach, it's pretty much a one-way street. Like, you're trying to sell me something.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily value for me as a person. Like, maybe it's valuable for my company or what the work I do, but like, that's not necessarily why I'm on there either. Like,
Right.
I'm trying to learn things too, and I'm trying to give you value maybe, and share ideas. And I'm not trying to hear a sales pitch on why you're the best, account-based marketing tool or whatever it might be, right?
Exactly.
There's millions out there. So
Exactly, man. Well, this has been fun, dude.
yeah, man, good
Thanks for
time.
coming on
Appreciate
here.
it.
Good conversations. I think we freaked
Yeah,
people out. We gave them some good takeaways. Then we freaked them out. And then we got them hopeful about the future. Get to
perfect.
learn about your history and maybe get
Yeah,
some people inspired to go launch those apps.
yeah. I think it was a good journey.
Good journey, man. Well, hey, don't be a stranger. We're gonna have to have you come back on here and just catch up and see how things are going as we get out of the COVID thing. And if you ever want to brainstorm or throw some app ideas off me, I'll promise to tell you if they're terrible, and I'll tell you if they're cool too.
That's a good idea. All right,
Yeah.
I'll hold you to that, man.
Yeah. And for those people listening, if you've learned something, and I freaking know you have because I have 2 pages of notes over here, front and back, then share this with someone else. Be a thought leader on whatever platform makes you happy and giddy inside. 8 people, 48, 72, 908, whatever it is. Just share that episode with someone, but put your thoughts on top. What did you learn? What takeaways did you have? The idea that we talked about with the place and the time and the context, and not going down the rabbit hole of the demographics driving all your decision, and being chill about the tech, but actually using it, putting strategy first. There's so many great takeaways. Put those on there. Tag Nick, tag myself. We'll comment. We'll help reshare that with you and amplify your message. But that's thought leadership. So go do that. And again, Nick, man, this has been awesome. Thanks for coming on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.
All right. For everyone out there listening, this has been the Hardcore Marketing Show. Go buy some ramen and we'll see you next time.